It's 2006 and this is Lydia O'Connell welcoming you to Joe's and my slideshow, capturing many years of travel, retirement, helping and enjoying each and every day of our visits, holiday and family gatherings. The slides include our 4 children, Adeline, John, Chuck, and Ann, spouses, 14 grandkids, plus relatives and numerous friends. I hope you enjoy these visual excerpts from our lives.
Lydia and Joe's first trip with their camera was in 1952 to Dearborn Village near Detroit. This is the Gothic clock, and that was Stephen Foster's home. From there we went to Dublin to visit O'Connell relatives. There was Great Aunt Kate, Aunt Margaret, Aunt Liz, Uncle Joe, and there's Dad and Ma and Ann. We're in their front yard, Uncle Joe and a neighbor and some great aunts, including Molly. We went from there to Niagara Falls, where Mom and Dad posed in front of the honeymoon cabins. Niagara Falls was a beautiful first location to have Dad and Mom try out their new slide camera. We visited Niagara Falls with my Aunt Irene, who was living in Buffalo, New York, and her married name was Harnick. These are the gardens at Niagara Falls, and we are on the Canadian side. From there, there's Aunt Irene on the right-hand side, Mother in the middle, and Ann on the left. We had a little buggy ride, a little Surrey ride around Niagara Falls. This is then the backyard of my Aunt Irene and Leroy Harnick. This is their son Buck with Harriet and their first 2 children, also in Buffalo. From there we went to New York City. This is Rockefeller Center. We took a Circle Line tour around Manhattan. There's the Statue of Liberty, the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and there we are at Coney Island. We're not on the launch anymore. Another Coney Island shot. We came home through Pennsylvania and we made a stop visiting some business associates and friends of Dad's. This is in Wisconsin. Friends of Mom and Dad, they're the Follensbys, Jim, Hazel, and Neil. This is Jim and his bride-to-be. When we got home, Bruce got a inflatable seal from Coney Island. There's Bruce as a baby. He was a year old then. These are friends of Mom and Dad's, Ben and Betty Weber. He was a business associate, became longtime friends. They lived in Milwaukee. This is Ben and Betty Weber and their grandchildren. This is heading for Cuba. Dad won a trip in 1953 from Ford Motor Company. This is in front of their hotel, the Hotel Nacional. These are the fellows with whom he traveled, all with Ford Motor Company. This is their taxi driver and guide. These are downtown scenes of Havana, Cuba. Going down a main road in Havana, looking across the bay. Dad enjoyed his trip a lot. The Morro Castle is in the distance. That's downtown Havana across the bay. The Morro Castle was really a fortress, and this is the old moat. Of course, there's no water in it anymore. This is a Cuban guard on duty. There's Dad in front of a big cannon on the Morro Castle. This is a monument to the Maine, which was sunk during World War I. This is out in the countryside of Cuba. There's someone's home. We're just in a residential neighborhood. This is a casino, very popular in Havana, Cuba. There's a papaya grove and some some blue-collar housing. If you can see the man there, he's climbing a palm tree and going to throw down a coconut. This is just vegetation along the side of the road in Cuba. Dad's looking outside of the window of his room in the Hotel Nacional at the swimming pool, and there they are poolside. Dad in the red trunks. And here he has returned home, and he's carrying 2 liters of banana brandy. And he brought me some souvenirs. Mom and I each got a scarf with maps of Cuba on it. Same year, John and Miriam were married in December. This is 1953. Summer of 1954, we went back to Canada, Dublin, Ontario. There's Uncle Joe in the middle, Dad on the left, Aunt Kate on the right. This is Aunt Molly. She's standing in front of the telephone company where she worked for many, many, many years. Returning home from Dublin that year, we went up through Ontario, crossed a body of water at Tobermory. We took a launch that carried our car like a ferry. There we are getting onto the ferry. And this is the countryside as we went north by northwest. This is a lovely area along a river where it was said that Franklin Delano Roosevelt fished and spent some of his leisure time. It was a very beautiful spot. And apparently the fishing was good there too. We're now at Sault Ste. Marie, crossing the water again into Duluth. Note the lumber in the water. A very busy port town. And we came back through Reamer, Minnesota, Big Thunder Lake, and it looked like it was great fishing. Mom and I probably got our limit that day. Looks like we're about ready to fix them up for dinner. That's Charlotte Larson, the wife of the owner of the resort. Looking out that way is Big Thunder Lake, and the island is where Chuck and Carol had their honeymoon. That's Johnny Larson, the owner. Coming south through Minnesota, we passed an iron mine at Crosby. Then we stopped at Uncle Otto's. There's Uncle Otto, his wife Aunt Myrtle, Bob, Paul, and Pat. In the middle of the picture, Patty and I are at the pool in Rochester, Minnesota. And there were almost always puppies at Uncle Otto's farm. There's Paul and Pat and Pansy and her puppies. Pansy loved to play cards, by the way. Aunt Myrtle loved her puppies too. And there's a bandy out and back from which we got eggs. This is the same year, 1954, and Brian came on the scene. And there he was with Big Brother Bruce in Mom and Dad's backyard. And we liked to go to February Park where there was a petting zoo. Mom and Dad loved to take the little ones there. And in Grandma's yard, the kids liked to play in her big wash tubs. This is at Crystal Lake. Patty Rossi is on the left. The Rossis were longtime good friends of the folks. Here we are in Vanderveer Park with Bruce and Brian. And we're at Lake McBride. Adeline on the right, Ann on the left. And little Brian. This is in Storm Lake. This is one of the Barlow houses. And there's little Brian on his rocking horse. Brian is here with his cousin Susie, and we're in Cedar Falls. There's Bruce and Brian in Cedar Falls. We had a little reunion day there with relatives from Minnesota. There was an amusement park. My Uncle Carl is in the middle. Patty Gerber is in front. Dad is on the right. Hired hand on the left. There's Aunt Myrtle and her sister Gertie, my Uncle Carl and Mother. We're at Uncle Otto's farm again. Gary Gerber on the left, Patty with the dog, Paul. This is what the farm looked like. We spent many, many hours of fun there. This is the house and picture of Aunt Myrtle, sort of. This is Julie Siegel, a little girl that I babysat with, and her mother Donna. This is Anne in Vanderveer Park in the Rose Garden, and we're with Johnny and Julie Siegel, the kids that I've babysat with. This is Bill Tank, and he's out in the yard. He's not only picking apples, but you can see he's helping with a wash, and that was very unusual, but he was doing that because Florence Tank had just had some surgery. These were flowers from Hawaii that John and Miriam sent to her. Now we're on the Wiesenberg farm, and that's Terry and Molly Wiesenberg, and that's Bus, and the horse is Texie, and that looks like Bruce, and that looks like Terry riding Texie. Wiesenbergs were long time and very good friends of the folks. John worked there sometimes during the summer when he was going to school. There's Anne and Molly on the horse, Bus overseeing our safety. Bruce and Brian were enjoying that too. Bruce and Brian are on the side of Grandma and Grandpa's house. And there they are playing cowboy on the back porch. Chuck and Carol about their engagement time. Adeline with Bruce and Brian again. And there they are, Bruce and Brian in Grinnell. This is the house where they live. Jack, Adeline, the kids, Mom and Dad, and Anne and dog Buffy. This is Christmas time with the Barlows with us. Mom and Dad were living at 1716 Davie Street. This is the new china that Chuck sent back from Korea, or rather from Japan. Christmas time is a great time at the O'Connell house. Almost always Santa visited. There's Buffy and the Barlow boys. Looks like they'd been good and that Santa brought all kinds of good things. Here's Adeline with the little ones. And there's Adeline and Jack. And they're moving into a different house. Bruce and Brian. There's Mrs. McCain on the right. That's Miriam's mother. We're at Adeline and Jack's house. There's Mr. McCain now on the right. Ray McCain. This is Chuck and John, and they were at the same time in Korea. In Japan. Chuck was getting out of the service at the time. And John was stationed in Hawaii. Here's Bill and Florence with their new car. They lived across the street from us. There's Chuck and Anne and the Siegel kids. In 1955, Chuck and Carol got married. Bob Gerber was in the wedding party, so was Anne. There was Ronnie McDermott, Chuck's best friend. John was not available. He was in Japan at the time. Carol throwing a bouquet. Here are the parents, Bud and Grace Weidenhammer, and Lydia and Joe. The bride and groom were all smiles. Aunt Myrtle is pouring coffee. Bob Gerber, her son, is on the left. This is a little double exposure, but Grandma wanted to save it because it has the cake that Brian got the first taste of. He reached out and took a handful of frosting. There's the bride and groom with the parents again. This is Delbert on the right. That's Carol's younger brother. Chuck and Carol. And it looks like the car is ready to go. It looks like somebody did a job on that. And here they come, ready to leave for their honeymoon. The same year, Mom and I took a bus ride from Davenport, Iowa to California. Our real goal was Hawaii. Dad was going to fly to California and meet us there. These are all scenes taken from the bus trip. We went through Iowa and Nebraska, and here we are in Vegas. And there we stayed with Mama Papa Taylor. They were long time friends of Mom and Dad. They had no children, and all we O'Connell kids called them Mama and Papa. They were so dear to us. He was a Navy man, and she was from Scotland. Here we are at the entrance to Forest Lawn. This is at the San Juan Mission in California. This is inside the mission. It was a stained glass window of the Last Supper. Here, Mom and I have arrived in Hawaii. We had to fly without Dad. because he missed the flight. Look at the welcoming leis. We were just piled and piled full of leis. Here's Dad arriving, and guess what he's got in his hand? It's a watermelon for Miriam. Here's the first night that the three of us were in Hawaii. We were visiting John and Miriam. John was stationed in the Navy there. There's a map of Oahu. And here are some Hawaiian scenes. This is the Aloha Tower, which used to welcome all the tourists when the way to get to Hawaii was on the SS Lurline. Of course, that was made obsolete by air travel. This is the blowhole on the other side of the island. This is King Kamehameha out in front of a government building. This is a Chilean training vessel, four-mast schooner, that we got to go on in Pearl Harbor because John was in the military and we had special privilege to go on there. Here we're in Pearl Harbor. It was before they had the platform built to the Arizona, the monument built. We did our tour just from a launch, from ship. This is the Utah. It's still there, of course, today. So much of the shoreline is beautiful in Hawaii. We were headed to Waimea Falls, and there's a portion of it, and there is another portion. And it was way back in a jungle. We had to go along a trail, and there you can see the jungle trail. Here's a lovely banyan tree, and it was on the premises of the Mormon temple on the island of Oahu. These are the gardens at the Mormon temple. This is John and Mom. John showing Mom the beautiful bird of paradise blooming. This is Kapiolani Park, where Kodak sponsored a Hawaiian ethnic show. They had hula dances, they had Tahitian dances, they had many kinds of cultural, ethnic songs and dances. As I mentioned, the show was sponsored by Kodak, and it was a free show in Kapiolani Park. There's Hilo Hattie, a very popular figure in Hawaiian culture. And of course, if Kodak sponsored it, that meant that they sold lots and lots of film. This lady was doing lovely hula hands. This man was climbing a palm tree and is going to throw down some coconuts. This is right close to Waikiki, by the way, at Kapiolani Park. There's a man pounding poi, and they gave the tourists an opportunity to try the hula. I'm in a blue dress there, and Dad was invited to, not hula, I don't know what she invited him to do, but he was sure pleased. We're on Barber's Point, which is where John and Miriam were living, and we're at the, obviously at the beach, and trying some surfing, body surfing. Here we are trying to get Mom to relax so that wave won't slap her down. She wasn't real crazy about the water. Dad and I loved it. We went out with John. We even had an opportunity to try a surfboard. We didn't have much luck. Here we are at Waikiki. This was easier to do, to ride in an outrigger. We're having a picnic here near where John and Miriam lived, and here's a typical Hawaiian sunset. We're doing some more touring in John and Miriam's Studebaker convertible. We passed some pineapple fields and had an opportunity for some tasting. So sweet, so juicy. Here are the pineapple harvesters. Look at the big machinery, but note that people are walking behind it harvesting. This is a sugarcane field, which grows very well in Hawaii. And here they're harvesting cane, but before they harvest it, they burn it. It's simply an easier thing to do. This is the Dole Pineapple Factory, and this was our tour guide. Instead of water fountains there, they have pineapple juice fountains. This is a lovely banyan tree. Banyan trees were brought to Hawaii and grow very well in that rich Hawaiian soil. This is a lobster claw, one of the common flowers, and these surfers are slides that were bought. Unfortunately, the surfers were none of us, but they were Hawaiians. They know how to do it. There's another outrigger, not one that we were in, however. This is in the lobby of the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. They change those hibiscus and flowers every day. This is a lovely bouquet that John and Miriam gave to Mother. Some orchids. This is where John and Miriam lived. And this is kind of part of the countryside out by Eva on the island of Oahu. We like the bougainvillea roadside. They were very colorful. There's another banyan tree. You can see how the roots start down from the limbs and grow right into the soil. This is Tripler Hospital, where Mike O'Connell was born. This is a curio shop. Notice that the arch is made of coral. It's no longer legal, of course, to harvest coral in Hawaii. It's a rare commodity, and they didn't want to ruin the reefs. It's a good idea to have that protected now. At Coco Joe's, we bought some hats made of palm leaves. We're at the Waioli Tea Room, and we had lunch there, and it was a lovely spot. And it is said that Robert Louis Stevenson lived and worked at this location. There were some ethnic dances and songs, and there was a fashion show. This is Trader Vic's in Oahu. And there we are having dinner at Trader Vic's. This was the entertainer, possibly Hilo Hattie. Notice the orchid lays on Mom and Ann. These are little girls out in the country selling hats and showing us their Hawaiian culture. They were very happy children, happy to share their songs and dances with us. This is the Pali, which is the mountainous area that divides the island. This is on Waikiki, looking over to Diamond Head. Looking in the other direction is the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. It's still painted pink today. And there was a man with his pet monkey. Mom and Dad out in front of the hotel in their matching Hawaiian outfits. We had an opportunity to visit what they call the Campbell's estate, which had been donated and was available for military personnel use. We had lunch there, and we did a lot of beach walking. It was a beautiful, many acred property. There's some beachcomber. I think his name was Joe. There's a papaya grove. If you've never had a Hawaiian papaya, be sure you taste one. All of the shoreline of Hawaii is beautiful. We are on the other side of the island now. That's Hanauma Bay, very good for snorkeling. The lighthouse is on the other side of the island. That would be the east side of the island. This is a Royal Hawaiian one more time. Mom and I are both standing in the shade. And here we are ready to leave John and Miriam's home. On the way to the airport, we stopped and got some more leis. And they tell you aloha, and it means hello, goodbye, I love you, and many other things, fine things. This is the punch bowl from the air. It's a military cemetery. And we say goodbye to Hawaii. Pau, or Pa'u, which means goodbye in Hawaiian, or the end. There's Dad with Carol and Adeline, who met him on return. We have guests from Minnesota and Virginia almost immediately. Aunt Maida and Uncle Ernie and some of their kids and grandkids, Uncle Mark, Aunt Peggy, and there's Uncle Mark fooling around with a funny nose, and Bud and Grace Weidenhammer, Carol's folks. It was very hot. There were no window fans, no air conditioning, of course, not even enough beds, really. This is December of the same year, 1955, and got a typewriter for her birthday. This is Christmas of 55. We're still living on Davie Street. Carol has now joined the family. That's Bill and Florence on the right. This is Mom's beautiful Christmas table. New Year's Eve, John, Rossi, and Iva on Dad's right. Then Chuck and Carol stayed with us for a while. Mom and Dad had bought a small house, and Chuck and Carol decided to move into Davie Street and to live in that house. Moving was tough work. I'm on the Wiesenberg horse again, buses on the right. This is springtime at 212 West 31st Street, Daffodils, and we're moving in March. Lydia and Joe and Anne moved to 212 West 31st Street. 1956 was the year. This is Grandma and Grandpa's living room, a beautiful fireplace, and outside a beautiful flowering plum. Carol is enjoying Mom and Dad's new living room. This is Patty Rossi's wedding, the same year. Patty Rossi married Edwards. Anne was in the wedding. This is in Pella, Iowa. 1956. There's always a tulip festival there. Pella was founded by the Dutch, and they're very proud of their clean town and their tulips every year. And they sport their ethnic costumes, and they sweep the streets. The same year, Brad has joined the family, and he's getting his first haircut. Here's a gathering in Mom and Dad's backyard. All the Barlows, and John and Miriam's kids, and Grandma and Grandpa. There's nothing I liked better than to have their kids and grandkids together. There's Mike. There's Brian giving Mike the eyes. And February Park again, petting the animals, the petting zoo. John with Michael in front of Mom and Dad's fireplace. John and Miriam and Michael in Mom and Dad's living room. And look who's having a birthday. It's Mike O'Connell. And Aunt Anne painted that little piggy bank for his birthday. Chuck and Carol and their kids and John and the Barlows. Here are the Barlow boys. Whoa, with Santa. It's Christmas now of 1956. This is Mom and Dad's living room. This is at Chuck and Carol's. This is a recital outfit or concert outfit of Anne's. We need to back up to summer of 56 when Chuck and Carol went with Mom and Dad to the East Coast. They went to Washington, D.C. This is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and Changing of the Guard. The White House, of course. This was before all the extra security. Our Capitol building. This is from the top of the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Monument. From there, they went to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and walked the boardwalk. This is in New York. Someone having a buggy ride in Central Park. They came back through upstate New York. This is the United Nations building. This is Columbia University. This is Grant's tomb. He is in Ulysses S. This is just the countryside, beautiful countryside in upstate New York. This is the entrance to Annapolis. Then they stopped to say hello to the Harnacks. This is Harriet and the children, Buck Harnack's wife and children. This is on the way home near Detroit. This is a Cotswold cottage which was built on the estate of Henry Ford. These are the estate and the gardens of Henry Ford. This is his home. And look who joins us in 1957, John Jr. Proud Michael is looking over baby John Jr.'s shoulder. And Grandma is visiting and helping out again. Mike on his trike. John and Miriam are now living in California. John Jr. was born in California, in the San Francisco area. This is their home in San Mateo. And this is visiting the zoo with Michael. These are the Barlow boys at Christmas. This is in Grandma and Grandpa's backyard. Note the Christmas tree. Mike was also there in Christmas of '57 with new baby brother John Jr. This is in Grandma and Grandpa's house. And this is what Grandma and Grandpa's house looks like after a snowstorm. Look at those big, beautiful evergreen trees just loaded with snow. This is John and Miriam's new house in Santa Clara, California. John and Miriam were visited by Mom and Dad. John's now wearing a United Airline pilot uniform. This is San Francisco Bay. And more of San Francisco. Trolleys, of course. And the Golden Gate Bridge. And Alcatraz, formerly a federal prison, now a museum. Fisherman's Wharf, of course, is one of the famous sites in San Francisco. Petting zoos, of course, are always popular with the kids. There's Mike enjoying the animals. Mike also likes to ride on the hay rack out at the berry farm. Now Mom and Dad are headed toward Big Basin and the giant redwoods. Dad's standing down in a big hole in a giant redwood. They're headed toward Monterey. This is the bay. And Pebble Beach. This is also Pebble Beach, the very famous golf course where all the stars played. They're now in Yosemite National Park in California. There are a lot of shots there. Grandma said that she liked Yosemite even better than Yellowstone. This is from Artist's Point. When Grandma and Grandpa were there, you could drive your cars up close. Now you have to take a shuttle. There's very limited car transport in Yosemite anymore. You can see how much Grandpa liked it. Took a lot of pictures in Yosemite. If you can look closely, there's a car going through this giant tree. There it is. Continuing Yosemite. The year now is 1958, and Jim O'Connell is born. Chuck and Carol's first. Here we are on our Uncle Otto's farm again. Ann and Pat and Paul are a little bit older. This is a Kiefer reunion. Aunt Myrtle and her two brothers and her sister Gertie. This is in California at the home of Mama and Papa Taylor again. Mother loved the flowers in California. And Dad was picking some citrus in California. These are shots of Lydia and Joe exploring California. This is the Barlow house in Storm Lake. And look who's on the scene. Denise. Denise Ann was born in 1958. They're the three Barlow brothers. Note the bike in the middle. It used to belong to Bob Gerber. There are the Barlow boys swimming. And there's the Barlow clan gathered around Mom and Dad. Looks like there are some other O'Connells in there too. Perhaps some of John's kids. And this is Jim when he was a year old. This is 1959. This is at the Barlow's house, Adeline and Jack, and the 4 kids. More Barlow family pictures. And it's Christmas time again. Haha, what did Santa bring? Skis. Oh, and guns. One of those cowboy hats is about 100 years old. There's Niecy wondering why she didn't get skis. She got a doll. Well, it's time to try the skis. On Chestnut Street, the Barlows could go right down to the road, right down the hill on which their house sat. This is Christmas of '59. Ooh, and look who didn't like Santa very much. I think it was Jimmy. And who's new on the scene? Billy. Billy and Jim kind of enjoying the snow. Well, kind of. This is out in their backyard. Chuck and Carol had bought that house by that time, the house on Davie Street. Here's the folks' visit in California again. Visiting Mother Goose Land with the kids. And then on to Seattle. Puget Sound. Dad's sister Peg had lived there for years. This is an arboretum. Uncle Mark and Aunt Peg used to take Mom and Dad there. Peg is the younger of Dad's 2 sisters. This is Jim's 2nd birthday. We're at summer of 1960 now. Mom and Dad are going through Disneyland with John and Miriam and the kids. I think they call that Magic Mountain. And there's the monorail. And there's Aunt Fern, one of Miriam's sisters, and John taking the boys for a ride on Dumbo. Doesn't look like we were enjoying it very much. And there's a Native American dance being presented at Disneyland. And leaving Disneyland on their way to Fern's house, where the kids played in the backyard. This is winter of 1960, and this is the bench in Grandma and Grandpa's backyard, and Jimmy and Billy. This is Chuck and Carol. In 1961, they took our Uncle Carl back to Texas after his recovery from a bad accident. These pictures are both in Texas and in Mexico, Monterrey, Mexico. One of our cousins, Carl Snyder, had a cattle ranch. That was his herd there. There's a Mexican farmer taking wood to town. This is a scene of Monterey with Saddleback Mountain in the background. This is a farmer working his fields with oxen. This is a Social Security building in Monterey, Mexico. And this is a taxi in Monterey, Mexico. This is a man atop a cart with his family. This is a man all by himself with some produce to take to town. This is a cathedral in Monterrey, Mexico, Saddleback Mountain in the background. This is a carrot field. Look at the harvesters doing it all by hand. There's a big wagon load of carrots. This is Carl Snyder's cattle herd again. We're back into Davenport, and those are beautiful roses out of Chuck and Carol's garden. Oh, Grandpa with his grandkids. Brent is on the scene now, and Glenn. And here's the whole gang. Mom and Dad and all the grandkids, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 at that time. There they are back in California again. There's Mom with flowers. Yes, baby Glenn is now on the scene. This is John and Miriam's backyard in Santa Clara. Three brothers, Mike, John Jr., and Glenn. This is Santa's village, really popular with the kids. Pet the animals, see Santa, and then the mad hare shows up. The boys even got trail rides at Santa's village. This is Mama Taylor again. They came up to visit Mom and Dad and John and Miriam. His name was Percival. He was a Navy man. She was Scottish. There's Glenn enjoying his first swing ride. The three O'Connell boys. The three O'Connell boys. Look who's riding the hobby horse. Look at that California sunshine. Look who's helping out. It's Christmas time. And this is still in Santa Clara. 61. Somebody got a space shuttle, looks like, for Christmas. I wonder who that was. Santa must have had a pretty big bag to get that in. Oh, Santa brought it to John, of course. United Boeing wasn't good enough. He had to have a space shuttle. This is Mom and Dad's house at Christmas time again. This is the same year at Christmas back at Chuck and Carol's. Cowboy boots, hats, guns. And here are the Barlows all dressed alike for Christmas. Who's on the scene? Brent. This is in Grandma's backyard. She had gladiolas as tall as she was. She liked all kinds of flowers. She had cannas and daisies and petunias and phlox, strawberries and asparagus and so forth. This is their new car. It was a chestnut brown Ford. Across the street is the home of Bill and Florence Tank, our longtime family friends. Chuck and Carol's black and red Ford is behind Mom and Dad's. This was a trip to New Salem with the Barlows that Mom and Dad made. New Salem, the land of Lincoln in Illinois, where it's a town kept in the mode of Lincoln times. They tented one night. It rained badly, so Mom and Dad went the next night to a motel. The first night, Mom slept in the car with one of the kids, Brent, I guess. This is in Mom and Dad's backyard on 31st Street. There's Uncle Ernie. There's Miriam, Uncle Ernie on the right, Gary Gerber. There's Uncle Ernie and Dad. And there's Chuck and Carol's kids in Niecy. And they're in Minnesota with Patty Gerber and Adeline. These are fall flowers at Mom's house, Mom and Dad's house. Chrysanthemums of every hue. This is a little blue spruce that Mom and Dad brought back from Buffalo, New York, and planted it. It was about 18 inches when they planted it. There's Mom with some beautiful iris. There's a cannas in her backyard. And the vegetable garden. Some coxcomb. If it would grow, Mom could grow it. This is the Barlows in fall of '62 at Black Hawk State Park. This is Killeen, Texas, where Ann and Bud lived. This is Uncle Carl's son's cattle. This is Dad in front of the oil well that belonged to Uncle Carl. This is Uncle Otto by the oil well in Texas. This is the cattle ranch. This is a visit to Arizona by Mom and Dad. They had friends there by the name of Eads, and they enjoyed a visit to Arizona for the first time. Note the cactus. The Goldwater building is in the background. This is on the Gerber farm, and this is the 4th of July, and it's corn. It's supposed to be knee-high by the 4th of July, but it's 6 feet tall. This was a corn bin that Dad helped build. Aunt Myrtle is showing Mom her flower garden, and some of the O'Connells were there because Mike did some fishing. And here they are around Silver Lake in Rochester, Minnesota, and everybody is feeding the Canadian geese. Mom always could find some dry bread so the kids could feed the geese. This is a turtle that they found in Uncle Otto's pasture. This is Dad with a couple of his grandkids at Lewis Lake. This was the O'Connells visiting Patty Wirtz's kids. In 1964, Mom and Dad went with Myrtle and Otto to Matamoros, Mexico, and to Texas. Back in their backyard, some grandkids feeding the squirrel. This is November of '64. Macy got roller skates for her birthday. This is back in California. Glenn and Fritz are getting a ride. There's Fritz begging for his dinner from Grandpa. John and Miriam and family. Mom and Dad, Glenn. This is the book depository in Dallas, Texas. Mom and Dad went through there one time, purportedly where Lee Harvey Oswald shot Jack Kennedy, and this is the memorial to Kennedy in Dallas, Texas. President John F. Kennedy. This was spring at the baptism of Bob. Bob O'Connell's now on the scene with 2 older brothers. In the backyard, everybody was helping Grandpa with his barbecue. Here's Mike. Here's Glenn. And Johnny. The same summer, Bud's mother visited from Yugoslavia. She also loved the backyard. She loved the flowers. She loved America. And she liked Dad's grill. She thought that was terrific. This is the same. This is Adeline taking her kids up the Mississippi through the locks on a pleasure boat. This is the bridge that swings. This is more skiing at Chestnut Street with the Barlow family. There's that long driveway up to the house and the barn. The barn where the kids had horses, they played basketball, where the chicken house served as a clubhouse. This Christmas, Mom and Dad topped those big trees out in front of their house, and you can see them propped against the house. Look how big now that little blue spruce is. It's grown for 4 feet. These are the 2 Christmas trees topped from the evergreens out in front of Mom and Dad's house. One was used by Chuck and Carol, one was used by Mom and Dad. There's the indoor shot of a homegrown Christmas tree. And there were lots of greens to share for decorating. In spring of 1965, John and Miriam moved from California to Streamwood, Illinois. That same spring, there was a major flood in Davenport. Notice the level of the water around the houses and the buildings. This is Streamwood a little later in the spring. They had a big yard. Bill and Florence Tank visited. They thought Mom and Dad's kids were their kids. Mom and Dad's grandchildren were their grandchildren. And they're having a great time. Jim doesn't seem real pleased with the water temperature. And look at the expression on Niecy's face. Are we having any fun yet? There's Brent. And there's Brad. And there's Niecy on her special swing. There were 2 ponies at the Barlow house. And everyone liked to ride. And they always give rides to their cousins who visited. His dad on the right, there's Adeline and the kids. Looks like Brent is ready to play football with his little sister. This is in St. Charles, Illinois, out in the country. This is John and Miriam's new house. They moved from Streamwood to St. Charles. This is at the Harnick's house in New York. Muffy on her horse. This is the home neighborhood of Jack Harnick, Buck's brother, his wife Yvonne, and the kids Susie and Philip on Long Island. After that visit to the Harnicks, Mom and Dad went to the World's Fair in New York. There's Mother. There were lots of companies that sponsored exhibits. There were lots of states that sponsored exhibits. And some of these shots are overviews of the World's Fair in general. Mom thinks it was in the Bronx. This was the main symbol of the 1965 World's Fair. This was part of Florida's exhibit, the space shuttles. Look at that Ferris wheel. It was sponsored by one of the tire companies. Florida sponsored lots of aquatic exhibits. There's Mom and Dad by a dinosaur, which was part of the Sinclair exhibit. Mother thinks that was the Thailand exhibit. And this, of course, was the Ford exhibit, in which Dad had a great interest. You can see that Ferris wheel was sponsored by U.S. Royal Tires. This is the monorail that was upside down. Notice it's hanging down from the railing instead of riding on the rail. I thought that was an inventive piece of sculpture made out of old automobile parts. And Linda was born in 1965. They're at their new home in St. Charles, Illinois. There's baby Linda. There's baby Linda with older brothers. And Daddy. What a tiny little thing she was. And of course, where you find grandbabies, you find Grandma. Back to the Barlows. and back to Easter time at Mom and Dad's house. There is the whole Barlow family in their Easter duds, 1966. Matching outfits for Denise and Adeline. In 1966 spring, Anne was pregnant. This is another Seattle trip that Mom and Dad took. There's Aunt Peggy, Uncle Mark, and their 2 kids, Jerry and Gracie. This is the grounds of the Seattle World's Fair. This is Jerry Nelson before he went to Vietnam. That was the Boeing building, which was being built at the time in the Seattle area. Uncle Mark did all the electrical work in that building. This is a beautiful tree in Seattle. Here's Dad getting ready to go to salmon fishing. Did they catch anything? Whoa, guess so. Uncle Mark is displaying. Aunt Peg and Uncle Mark are saying, what do we have for dinner? Mom and Dad say, let's have the salmon. This is the capital of Washington in the city of Olympia. There's baby Linda. And there's dancer Denise showing off her various steps and assorted costumes. She was a student of dance for a while. I don't know how one taps on grass, do you? This is at John and Miriam's house with good friends Bus and Elma Wurstenberg and their daughter Molly. And there's Dad and all the O'Connell kids of John and Miriam. There's Linda enjoying Mom and Dad's backyard. Look at the size of that blue spruce. There's Linda in her stroller. Linda with a bigger smile. She likes Grandma and Grandpa's backyard. This would be at Lake McBride with a whole bunch of cousins, grandkids, lots of them together. And back to Barlow's for pony rides. There's Linda and there's Amber, their dog, John and Miriam's dog on Chestnut Street, in St. Charles. This was a baby shower for Anne when she was pregnant with Mark, given by her friend Alice on the right, Alice Labe Phillips. We were teachers together. There's Mother on the right, and Alice's mother is behind her. She crocheted that blanket. There's Carol getting ready to go to be a bridesmaid for one of her friends. This is visiting Dublin, Ontario again. There's Aunt Molly in the middle. There's Jack and Harriet. Buck and Harriet. Buck and Harriet in front of their house and all their kids. There's Muffy having her first communion. This is at Barlow's across the street. Some neighbors had a pool. This is Ann and Bud when they were standing up in Judy Mack's wedding in Davenport. These are some football players out in front of Davie Street. Yeah, it looks like a couple of Chuck and Carol's boys, perhaps Bob and Jim, joined by the O'Connells from St. Charles. Brad is celebrating a birthday. So it must be fall. Nice bike. Let's see, Bob Gerber would have been 50 years old, so that's how old that bike was. There's Grandma and Grandpa, and that was springtime, and we were celebrating Mom's birthday. It says, Happy Birthday, Mom. And Marky is now on the scene. Mark was born in '66. Mom and Dad took a trip to Florida to visit their friends, the Burgraffs. That's Bergie. It looks like the two of them went fishing. They went down to the Keys, enjoyed the seashore, enjoyed more fishing. This is where they stayed. Mom was proud to show the catch of the day. Mother loved the flowers. She loves the flowers no matter what state you're in. This was the day. This is going into Canada now, and this is the start of their Butchart Gardens tour. That day, they had breakfast in Florida, they had lunch in New York, and they had dinner in Seattle. These are all the Butchart Gardens, Canada. Mom and Dad had 11 trips to Hawaii and many, many more other wonderful trips because John was the pilot with United Airlines. They had special passes. This is still Butchart Gardens in Canada. These are the Parliament buildings in Canada and Vancouver, lit up at night. This is part of the seacoast around the Vancouver area. These are government buildings. Mother said they were all so beautifully kept and the gardens were beautifully groomed. More government buildings in Vancouver. In 1967, we were in Dublin, Ontario, Canada, for the Centennial Parade, in which Dad's aunt, Aunt Molly, my great-aunt Molly, rode on a float. And there she is, looking straight ahead of us. She's in a black dress with a gray shawl. And here she is with her head turned toward us. That was a Centennial Parade in 1967. Mark was little. Mark was just a year old, and he went with us. Here was Linda. She was 2 years old that year. Now we're in Minnesota with Bob Gerber, his wife Gloria, their son Boyd. This is Patty, Gary, and Lisa. Patty Gerber Stensrud, Gary, and their daughter Lisa. This is Marky enjoying Mrs. Worley's cats. Mrs. Worley was a neighbor of Mom and Dad. This is back at the Barlows. More pony time. Ponies and pets at the Barlows. This is a pheasant that Jack Barlow caught and had stuffed for Mom and Dad. This is another trip to Seattle. Discovery Bay is in Seattle. It's a lovely park. Looks like Dad has been fishing again with Uncle Mark. Yeah, look at that catch of the day. This is summer of '68. Some of the coastline around the Seattle area. Down at the Seattle Center with the Space Needle in the background. And more salmon fishing. Suppose they caught anything? Oh, yeah. This is the temperate climate rainforest. Only one of two in the world is out on the Olympic Peninsula. These are trees that are growing off a log of other dead trees. This is Mount Olympus. And Mom and Dad are on their way through the countryside to Grand Coulee Dam. This is Mount Rainier, which you don't often see because it's usually clouded in. This is Grand Coulee Dam from a distance. This is the Visitor Center. And these are shots of Grand Coulee Dam up close. A source of power for Washington State, some of Oregon. These are Mom and Dad's friends, Pauline Nelson and Bob. There's Aunt Peggy, daughter-in-law Bonnie, and children. This is in an arboretum in Seattle. This is back on the Barlow Ranch with the ponies. This is at John and Miriam's house. They were building a barn, and there's Jigs pulling the kids. Even Grandma is getting a ride, and Linda's loving up the kitties. This is Garden of the Gods in Colorado. Beautiful red rock formations. And baby Steve comes on the scene, the 14th grandchild. Do you think Brother Mark is pretty proud? In 1973, Mom and Dad took another Hawaiian trip, and they went to several different islands. First Oahu, then Kauai, and then the big island called Hawaii. This is on the island of Oahu at the Polynesian Cultural Center, which is an assortment and an education of the different cultures of all the Polynesian cultures, including Tahiti, Fiji, the Maoris, and the Hawaiians as well, of course. They have what they call the Parade of the Longboats, which displays different cultures, their songs, their dances, their native costumes. It's a lovely presentation. This is at the Polynesian Cultural Center. I think that's Samoa. Polynesian Cultural Center on the island of Oahu. They went from there to Kauai, and they're going up the river on a launch to the Fern Grotto, and there they're standing in the Fern Grotto. And this is the kind of launch that they got there, riding in. All of the coastline is beautiful in Hawaii. This is where they stayed on Kauai. Big banyan tree. They're now on at old Fort Lahaina, which was a whaling village at one time. This is the Sheridan, and this is a macadamia nut factory. Macadamia nut farms are on the Big Island, and this is the volcano. It's an active one on the Big Island. Here's some of the dried lava, and you can see the destruction of vegetation. And look what Grandma's looking at. The lava flow came right across the road. Now they're looking down into the lava crater, and steam is coming up. This is Black Sands Beach, which is, of course, lava rock all ground into sand by the force of the ocean. This is Lava Park, where various formations of lava have come to look like animals because they have vegetation growing over them. This is Akaka Falls, also on the Big Island. And Akaka Falls Park. This is actually Hilo Park, man-made lagoons. This is Christmas time back in Davenport, and the O'Connell boys, Bob, Jim, and Bob, Jim, and Bill with Mom and Dad, Chuck and Carol, out in front of the home in which Chuck lived for nearly 70 years. There's Bill at Christmas time. And then the O'Connell boys are going fishing. Looks like they're having a picnic, too. Here's Linda. In 1974, Bud's brother visited. That's Vlasto and his wife, Sheila. They came to Mom and Dad's house in Davenport, and they went to John and Miriam's house in St. Charles. Yeah, everybody liked Dad's grill a lot. This is Florence Tank and Bill Tank, longtime neighbors and dearest friends of Mom and Dad. That's Mom out in front of Chuck and Carol's house with Monique. There's a picture of Bob. And this begins a trip in 1974 that Mother and Dad took with Chuck and Carol and the boys. They were on their way to Florida, And the next few shots are taken as they went through the Smoky Mountains. They do look smoky, don't they? Rhododendron must grow in Kentucky. They stopped at an old mill, an old grist mill that ground flour, and saw some other old village buildings. And this is Bergie's house. They went down to see the Burgraffs, and they stopped at St. Augustine and saw the cannon going off. And there's a statue of St. Augustine. The city was named after that saint. And here are the O'Connells enjoying Daytona. Daytona, remember, is the beach with sand that's so hard you could drive your car right out onto the sand. And they went to Cape Canaveral. Notice the rockets in the back. And then to Disneyland. There's the Kontiki display. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Mickey Mouse leading the parade. The boys got locked in the stocks. What mischief had they been up to? They came back through Boston. This is a church in Hyannisport. This is the Constitution, the ship, the Constitution, in Boston Harbor. They're looking across the bay now to Hyannisport. The same year, John O'Connell's boys were, and Linda, were in the Kane County Fair. Here they are showing their sheep. There's Linda and Glenn. There's John Jr. They all raised sheep and were very active in 4-H. They built a barn specifically to house their sheep. They also raised chickens for a while. Always had a big garden, lots of pets. This is all the Kane County Fair. This is Chuck and Carolyn family at Christmas time, 1974. And after that, wintertime of 75, Mom and Dad were up snowmobiling at Paul Gerber's farm. Can you believe Grandma was on a snowmobile? It's noisy, it's stinky, but she did it anyway. Dad really liked it. You could take him out into the country and turn the motor off, and it was just beautiful. In December of 1975, Mom and Dad took Mabel and Ray McCain to Florida, where they had relatives, and dropped them off there. There are the McCains with Mom, and they're on their way to Florida. Mom and Dad again stayed with the Burgraffs, and Bergie thought he had a lapdog. Well, anyway, his Dalmatian thought he was a lapdog. This is Bergie and his wife. Longtime friends of Mom and Dad. This is a neighbor's garage in Bergie's neighborhood. This is another little cottage in Bergie's neighborhood. And this is Brian's wedding, spring of 76. Brian and Debbie got married in Atlantic, Iowa, his hometown, and then they were off to Idaho, where they were to start new careers. This is Glenn's wrestling group who visited Mom and Dad in summer of the same year, 76. Glenn and his wrestling friends. And here's our friend Cookie. His name was Ira Cook. We called him Cookie. Longtime family friend. This is Jim, proud to be going to Iowa State. There's Billy with Monique. And this is Mom and Dad in their backyard. And now the blue spruce is about 25 feet tall. And thus ends their slideshow.